from here in Taiwan and around the world. A Taiwan court has rejected appeals by 4 suspects in a corruption scandal sweeping the nation. Harel Hughes brings us the latest from Taiwan's High Court.
Taiwan's High Court is standing firm on the decision to detain 4 suspects incommunicado while they're being investigated for corruption over a development project here in Taipei. The court has rejected their appeals to be released while the investigation is ongoing. It's the latest in a corruption case that's gripped Taiwan, involving former Taipei mayor and Taiwan People's Party founder Wen-je. Ko was arrested for the 2nd time earlier this week and is now being held incommunicado at a detention center in Taipei. The court's decision is final for these 4 people: Ko's deputy mayor, the chair of the development project, and 2 others involved in the case. The court says there is evidence they tried to tamper with evidence and collude with other defendants in the case, so it's necessary for them to continue being detained. They'll now be held incommunicado throughout the investigation. Now, Wenje himself has not filed an appeal for release, but if he plans to do so, the High Court's decision for his associates does not bode well for him, as prosecutors build their case over the next 2 months. Ryan Wu and Harel Hughes in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Supporters of former Taipei Mayor Wenje have launched what they call a quiet revolution outside the detention center where he's being held. They're criticizing his arrest in connection with a corruption scandal during his time as mayor. He's being held incommunicado while the investigation's going on. Ke founded Taiwan's 3rd largest political party, the Taiwan People's Party, and ran for president in this year's election. Ke's wife, Chen Pei-chi, was among the supporters defending his innocence.
虽然没有办法去亲自见到他，但是我觉得我来这边，我觉得我自己的心跟他更近了。我不晓得说今天会因为他对市政府有那么的认真的一个工作的态度，会今天导致他今天到这边来。
China will no longer send its children abroad for adoption. Thousands of families across the world have adopted Chinese babies and children over the past 30 years. As Wesley Lewis reports, Beijing's turnaround is affecting hundreds of new families.
China will no longer allow children from the country to be adopted by non-Chinese nationals overseas. Beijing says the change in policy is in line with international trends concerning adoption.
今后除外国人来华收养3代以内旁系同辈血亲的子女和继子女外，不再向国外送养儿童。这符合相关国际公约的精神。
For 3 decades, foreign families have adopted Chinese children after the country permitted the practice in 1992. Between 1979 and 2015, China's one-child policy restricted family sizes, and many parents chose to give up children for adoption. Over 80,000 children, mostly girls, were adopted by families in the U.S., the most of any country. And this change in policy has left hundreds of families at various stages of adoption in limbo, as it's a process that typically takes several years. Families like the Welches from Louisville, Kentucky, who successfully adopted 1 child from China and began the process to adopt another in 2019.
It was actually 5 years ago this month that we were matched with a little girl that we call Penelope. She was 5 years old at the time, and she has a sensitive medical need, which makes it almost impossible for her to be adopted where she is.
China suspended foreign adoptions during the COVID-19 pandemic, but later resumed them. The Welches say they had completed all the paperwork and started preparing for their adoptive daughter's arrival.
We prepared, we bought new clothes for her. Her bed has been ready since January of 2019. We worked on language. We practiced making Chinese food that she would like. We did all of the things and we were ready, but the call never came.
Adoption agencies in the U.S. say the policy change is clear, and it means ongoing adoption cases are going to be terminated.
I'm not going to stop advocating, and I hope others won't either. But the communication that we got was clear. The ministry spokeswoman in China made it very clear that they are ending adoptions, and the notice that was given to the Department of State said that included pending adoptions.
The Welches say they plan to appeal the decision and advocate for other children and families with pending adoptions. The move to end foreign adoptions comes as China's birth rate continues to decline. Last year, the number of Chinese newborns dropped to around 9 million, while the overall population shrunk for the second year in a row. Beijing knows that its former birth control measures have led to fewer young people having to support a massive aging population. For this reason, China's previously unwanted children are now seen as future assets it would rather keep hold of. Alex Chen and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
Over 500,000 people in southern China have been told to evacuate as Asia's strongest storm so far this year makes landfall. Super Typhoon Yagi has seen schools, businesses and transport suspended. The storm has brought gale force winds and heavy rain to Hainan Island, with power cuts affecting more than 800,000 households. The storm has more than doubled in strength since leaving the Philippines earlier this week, where it killed 16 people. Pope Francis has appealed for an end to ethnic violence in Papua New Guinea, the latest stop on his trip to Southeast Asia. Papua New Guinea has a long history of ethnic warfare. In recent months, dozens of people have died in violent attacks in remote villages. The Pope also called for better treatment of workers and for Papua New Guinea's natural resources to better benefit local people. For decades, the country's gas, gold and other resources have attracted multinational companies. The Pope's trip also includes Indonesia and Singapore. Vietnam is hoping electric vehicles can drive the country towards carbon net zero, and it set an ambitious EV taxi quota for itself. Joyce Sung took a ride in some of the taxis to meet the drivers steering the green transformation.
Vietnam's busy streets with its honking cars and motorcycles are in transition away from petrol cars towards electric vehicles or EVs to cut down on pollution. Now, the government has been doubling down on this green goal, aiming for all new taxis to be electric from 2030 onwards, with the hopes that all cabs in the country will be EVs by 2050.
Ahead of the game is this fleet of bright blue cabs from the country's first electric-only taxi firm, GSM, owned by the same group behind VinFast, Vietnam's EV giant. All of GSM's cabs are VinFast cars, the company that first made global headlines when its stock skyrocketed after being listed in New York's NASDAQ. They've since plunged, and VinFast has been relying on subsidiaries, with 70% of its deliveries going to GSM.
Domestically, GSM is trying to carve its own share of a competitive ride-hailing market that's dominated by the regionally popular Grab platform. Now, users can call for the EV taxi by picking up the phone and dialing or using this app.
And it's also easier for the cab drivers, like Mr. Mai, to earn with GSM. As with other taxi firms, GSM has a quota he must reach to get his base salary. But Mr. Mai says it's simpler for drivers to hit GSM's quota than those of traditional firms.
Mình linh động nhiều thứ hơn, có thể giải quyết được những chuyện gia đình thí dụ.
For Mr. Mai, the biggest downside is having to charge the car. On a full battery, he can only take about 15 riders if they're going short distances.
He says normally in a day, he'll need to charge his car twice for 40 minutes each. But because charging ports are still relatively rare in Ho Chi Minh City, sometimes with long lines of EV drivers waiting to charge, he says the wait time can get up to 2 or even 3 hours. Mr. Tuan here has been waiting for 30 minutes just for a free port to charge his car. But this is pretty normal.
Dạ, công việc đợi sạc xe này là rất là bình thường.
VinFast says it has 150,000 of these charging ports across Vietnam, but given how quickly demand for EVs is growing, urban centers like Ho Chi Minh City are going to need more.
That's especially as foreign competitors like China's top EV maker BYD enter Vietnam's market. Right now, VinFast has a monopoly on the infrastructure, and their ports can only charge VinFast cars. This month, the government will consider subsidizing electricity prices for charging stations to keep Vietnam on track with other advanced economies, aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050.
reaching Vietnam's green goals will take time, especially as the government eyes even larger scale projects like electric buses in the future. But with thousands of these EV taxis already on the street, Vietnam is off to a strong start. Ethan Chen, Allison Nguyen, and Joyce Sun in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam for TaiwanPlus.
It's the first week of class for university students in Taiwan, and one band is helping a group of freshers look forward to their new semester by connecting them to their past. Yu Chen Lai reports.
Mia is singing about her father's migration to Taiwan across the Black Ditch, or what is known today as the Taiwan Strait. It's a common past for many Taiwanese families, and she's bringing that history to life on stage for college students starting their first day of university.
因为我们带来很多跟台湾的过去的历史、现在的文化的串联。
当我知道这个卡达港原来是看得见海的地方，我整个人是打开的。
我觉得是有一点把这个代沟补起来。
That's a gap Mia herself felt growing up. When she was preparing to go to the US to study, she was only interested in Western art. It was only after she landed in New York that she began wondering about her own cultural identity from Taiwan. That's when she started a band with her husband, Scott, over 20 years ago. It's called A Moving Sound, and they incorporate instruments from around the world. There's a bass guitar, paired with the Chinese mandolin or liuqing, a drum from the Middle East, as well as an erhu, typically heard in traditional Taiwanese operas. Part of their performance at universities is to share with students about Taiwan's own musical traditions. And what these classical instruments are capable of when they break out of old conventions. Scott says their experimental approach to music reflects Taiwan's democratic, multicultural environment.
I kind of feel like our music could only have been made in Taiwan. Like not just because it's got all the ethnic references are Taiwanese. Not only that though, just the climate of creativity and openness and freedom, I feel it's in the music, and I feel like that's what we deliver.
Scott says for their latest pieces, they worked with a string quartet called Ethel from New York, and they hope these international collaborations will bring Taiwan to new audiences who may not know much about the country. In a couple weeks, A Moving Sound will set off to live among and perform for underserved communities in the U.S. states of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, as part of a residency program funded by the U.S. National Endowment for the Arts. Their U.S. trip will also bring them to university campuses, as well as the Smithsonian Institution.
看完生动的示范演出或是表演，很多人会来跟我们，甚至是小朋友，他说他希望长大以后可以去台湾旅行。我想这是我觉得音乐能够让我们像是做一个国民外交的一个途径，我觉得是我们的荣幸。
A Moving Sound wants to paint a picture of Taiwan in the mind of their listeners, and they hope their music carries not just Taiwan's culture and history, but also the diversity and openness that made their creativity possible. Isan Pan, Kamashu, and Yu Chen Lai for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Finally, let's jet off with some highlights from Egypt's International Air Show. I'm Louise Watt. Take care. I'll see you next time.